Hello, my valued viewer, and welcome back actually, this is something new. PastorRant, I call it, because I rant. Creativity explosion! Um, I haven't done anything in a while for Yukian because, uh, I didn't want to produce anything crappy, or too crappy, of course. Um, and I've also been pretty busy, so I waited until I got my new mic. That's pretty cool. I got that for Christmas. I got Whooper for Christmas. Eh. And I have a little quick ball for him, so we can take him along for the ride. Yeah. Anyway, so I'm actually just going to be talking about the history of Israel. This is going to be split up into a bunch of parts because I wanted to go pretty much like a pretty in depth. Um, I recorded this twice already, and then I was like, no, it's not good enough. So I'm going to make it smaller bits, but uh, more information and a bit shorter, I guess, instead of just two parts and then boom, that's everything. Um, so let's just get into it, I guess. Um, we are going to try to stay as unbiased as possible, or neutral as possible, meaning um, since the Bible is one of the biggest sources for this kind of history, it is recognized by uh, all types of historians, Christian and non-Christian alike. Um, it is recognized as a pretty good authority when it comes to history. You just often take away God from it, and to assert some validity with it, we can just take a look at one of the newer discoveries in comparison to the thousands and thousands of years it's been since it was originally written. But with the Dead Sea Scrolls, some portions of it have been found to be from like 100, 200, 300 AD, or actually 100, 200 AD to even the 3rd century BC. So it's pretty valid because we know it's reliable for 2,000 plus years. Um, the scribe process, so we can assume it was also valid for the less than 2,000 years that the rest of the stuff has been written from. So that's just the basic stuff. I'm not going to get into like scriptural authority type stuff like inspiration and whatnot. That's not what this is about. We are going to start not with, since we're trying to take away God and bias and whatnot. We're going to be starting with Abraham, and we're actually going to start with like really what happens with Israel. The first kind of instance of Israel beginning happens with Abraham, where he believes that God promises him a nation, child, and land in 17-ish BC. These earlier dates are going to be a bit more rough estimate type because we don't know exact dates until much later. Um, but we do know that he had a son named Isaac, and that was the promised child. And then he had his son was Jacob, who was later named Israel. Um, this is the beginning of the nation. That part of the promise was that Abraham would be the father of great nations, and that Israel would be one of them. This is like the promised nation, the one that God would bless. Uh, Jacob or Israel, whichever you prefer, had 12 sons. I'm going to try to do it by memory for the flex. Issachar, Zebulun, Gad, Naphtali, Asher, Benjamin, Dan, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Joseph. That's 12, right? Hey, I did it. I'm looking at my notes right here. Anyway, uh, but what happens with them is they sell Joseph, as the story goes, they sell Joseph into slavery. Um, and then Joseph, when he eventually becomes a slave in Egypt, he's eventually thrown into prison, and eventually he prophesies that there's going to be a 7-year famine. And so Pharaoh basically says, well, you prophesied this would happen, fix it. And so he's appointed to be second in command over all of Egypt. At this time, Egypt was like kind of powerful. It wasn't like a huge empire or anything, but it was kind of powerful. Um, the pharaoh during this time, we assume, is one called like Djoser with like a D before the J. Um, this pharaoh, we think it was him because there's a thing called the Famine Stele, and the Famine Stele refers to the 7 year famine. So we know at least the 7 year famine was true because we're trying to be neutral. Uh, so at least that part of this story is historical accurate. I'm only throwing a couple archaeological discoveries in there because why not? I want to spice up this early section a little bit more than because it's more vague than other parts. But so he became second command, and as the story goes, the famine spread to where his brothers were, as well his brother and father. Before this, Abraham and his grandson Jacob or Israel, all the way through, and beforehand as well, they were kind of nomadic. Uh, nomad, like they're nomads. That's what I mean by that. Not that they're like gnomes or anything. Why did I think of that? Anyway, why do I have both earbuds in? This is kind of weird. Why do I have any earbuds in? I can't hear as well. Anyway, um, um, so they didn't stay in one place. Like they didn't establish a town or a city or anything, but it was established with Abraham and Lot. As the story goes, they also divided up the land. They're like, hey, I go here, you go there, and Lot says, okay. So that's a bit of that too. But the land that Abraham chooses was a land that God, or at least he thinks that God promises him as well. So back to Joseph, his brothers actually come to Egypt because Egypt was adequately prepared for this. So the famine, I mean, so they all come to him. He's like, I'm gonna pretend to be your brother for a little bit, or not your brother for a little bit, and then I'll give you food. So he gets them some of the best land in Egypt to settle in. Um, so the Israelites established themselves in Egypt as part of Egypt. So like that's where the people like first kind of start to really exist. And they live in peace for 400 years as a like mixed culture and everything. Um, what happens in over 400 years, you have to understand um, the people like the Israelites are going to populate a lot more than 12 dudes and their wives. So these 24 people will become like 48 in the next generation or whatever. Actually, that's not math. Anyway, you can expect it might be like 50% more each generation, perhaps, if they all have like three children. But regardless of my random assumptions, it's been 400 years, so their population has increased so much that the pharaoh at this new time actually was kind of afraid of them, and that's mostly because they started putting them into slavery. The first slave mentioned in the Bible is Joseph, um, but that's the first one mentioned. We know slavery was at least established to some part, but eventually, throughout their time, it says that they forget Joseph and what he did for the people, and they put them into slavery. Um, and their slave work. Now they didn't build the pyramids. You might hear some pastors say that they're wrong. Um, their slave work was not to build the pyramids, and we do have attendance log records of the employees, some of them, showing that they built the pyramids. So it's a reasonable assumption to think that only actual employees, actual Egyptians, were entrusted to build such great uh, pieces of architecture. Instead, what the Israelites did was make the materials for it. So we do have that mentioned in the Bible that they mostly made bricks and whatnot. The men did at least, and eventually they make it with all straw and stuff like that. And we actually have in Rekhmires tomb, uh, that's dated to around 1300 BC. Um, we see a depiction of um, a how do I want to put this, slave master, slave overseer, I think is the better term for it. With a lot of light skinned people being Jews, making bricks without straw, and That's a fun little detail. But it goes along with the story. Eventually, the pharaoh, being afraid of this overpopulation of this different culture, who were slaves, they might revolt. So he limited their population by trying to just cut it off completely. They, he ordered for all the babies to be killed by being thrown in the river, the Nile River. And there's this guy named Moses. His mother agreed with the idea of throwing him in the river, just with a basket that floats on it too. So he was basically there's a whole story about how he was adopted by the daughter of Pharaoh, and then he killed a dude, so he ran away. He came back, led the Israelites out of Egypt. Woohoo! We're speed running, and then they somehow miraculously escaped without God and stuff. It's who knows how they escaped. The God certainly must not be real. Anyway, um, they somehow escaped. They must have tricked them somehow. They must have run away during the night. We're just gonna assume one of those things. And they somehow got across the Red Sea. Sucks to be Pharaoh. Also, the Pharaoh mysteriously disappeared then and was replaced by another dude. But we don't talk about that. So they were given a law on Mount Sinai they believed to be from God. It's recorded that their leader Moses goes up and receives these tablets from God. And when he comes back down, the Israelites immediately turn from God and worship idols. And we'll get to that in a second. But why this law is important is because it becomes part of the source of where the Jewish religion uh, starts to actually become more prominent. These 10 Commandments, and it increases pretty quickly as we go on. But since they worshipped idols, God's like, hey, none of you are gonna see the promised land, like the actual land that would become Israel. Uh, you guys are gonna have to wander around for 40 years, and so that kind of sucked. But they did it, and Moses also did something else. Also said to be against what God wanted. So he was able to see the land but not enter it, and he died before the Israelites entered the land. His successor was Joshua. Again, there was no king at this time, no pharaoh, no like leader. It was just like, or there was a leader. It was just this guy's our leader, and that's it. Um, so Joshua became the new leader. He led the majority of the Promised Land campaign. Um, Now, here's where we need to establish something that will be kind of important for the rest of this. Um, when reading Hebrew and stuff like that, the Bible, the Old Testament is mostly written in Hebrew. It's also written in Aramaic and stuff like that, but and also Greek with the Septuagint and whatnot. But regardless, Hebrew is a ridiculously difficult language to learn. I'm choosing to learn Greek for now. I might get to Hebrew later, but Greek is what I'm doing now. I took one look at those stupid number things, and I just said, nope, none of that. Like one of the number charts. Um, the difference between 1 and 10 is like a little comma. Like it's a comma is 10. Uh, like the tens place. 2 and 20 have like a little line. That's a difference. So it makes things really confusing to try to like differentiate between, and it gets worse because vowels don't exist in Hebrew, or at least they didn't until the 1600s, and that I'm talking or not 16 8600, like our version of the year 600, like this half of history. So and it wasn't finished until like a couple hundred years later. It took a while to establish an accurate value system, but it's very, very complicated. Regardless, we don't know the exact numbers of like how many people fought each battle, how many people died each battle, stuff like that. And we don't know populations to their exact number either. So I'm not going to be mentioning any of the numbers for this, but I will be mentioning that they they're ordered by God, according to what they believed, to get rid of Canaanites completely. Um, now the Canaanites were known for a variety of things, and this is important to know because of kind of the more recent accusations of Israel, oh, are they trying to kill all of Hamas? Or is it full genocide? Stuff like that. Um, and the definition of genocide is targeting any people group and just planning to kill them all, like eradicate them all from existence. Um, so it's might be significant later, but we're not gonna like talk about that till later. They were basically ordered to commit genocide by God. Uh, However, they failed. Now this might seem like a good thing, right? These people weren't completely wiped out. No, it was actually pretty bad because the Canaanites were pretty bad. Like let's read the whole list. They were a bit hostile, so they weren't friendly to the Israelites or anyone else. They're known for corruption, like America and Russia. Anyway, especially Ukraine. Ukraine has a really bad government. Um, they were also known for child sacrifice, bestiality, and I'm gonna stop there before I get canceled. So basically, they were pretty bad, just a tad. Um, but they fail in so many ways. Sometimes they don't kill everybody that they're supposed to. It goes by case basis as well. But they don't kill everybody they're supposed to kill, and there's even the infamous Gibeonite treaty where these people, the Gibeonites, come over and say, "Hey, we want to make peace with you. We're just neighbors." Totally, they make a treaty with them without thinking at all, and they're like, "Woohoo, we get to live." And according to what they believe to be God, is that that they should honor that treaty. So they immediately fail. They became woodworkers for the Israelites, and I don't think that like lasted. I think they just kind of walked away from that eventually, but I'm not sure. I'm not going to go into much depth and research about that. But the point is, Israel messed up. So they didn't commit genocide here, and they disobeyed God before they destroy the Canaanites. This would actually come back to bite them immediately. They didn't even finish conquering the like whole promised land. Um, they didn't kick out those people, and they controlled the majority of the area we call Israel. But since they didn't kick out the Canaanites, they began to become like them. They adopted a lot of their practices, including their gods and goddesses, and they child sacrifice. Yeah, but this is where we get to the next era of Israel, and that's the era of the judges. The judges are basically local leaders that did stuff. They're supposedly commissioned by God to fix things. There's a pattern we call the pattern of judges, or at least I do. That the Bible says the people did evil in the eyes of the Lord. God gave them over to their sin. A foreigner comes over, like a foreign nation or group of people will come over, conquer them, and then they'll ask God for help. Say, God, we promise to follow you totally if you help us. And so God's like, all right, charity. And he sends a judge. And so the judge will come and bring peace. And that will usually last for like 15 to 20 years or something like that. And then they just go back to the square one, basically. And there are 12 judges. I'm not going to go into each and every one here. They were all significant, even though some are mentioned a lot less like than others. Some were more or mentioned more in depth, like Deborah and Samson. Um, but we're just gonna kind of skip that bit. After all this craziness, for like what is it, 100 years? It's been 300 years since they've been out of Egypt, and all these other nations and whatnot. Again, Israel's not a nation yet. It's just a bunch of dudes living in the promised land, and that's it. Um, but they're like, we want a king, we want a kingdom, we want to establish things here. We want an earthly ruler that we can see, and according again to what they believe, is that God said okay, and the prophet Samuel made Saul king or anointed Saul's king, and that's around 1020. That's when Israel was officially a kingdom, a nation, and that's when it first existed. And we're going to see that last for a whole 5 minutes. Um, um, well, not 5 minutes in my time because I'm going to be ranting about it for a while. Um, After Saul was pretty bad. They almost immediately regret him. Um, he turns away from God and all that stuff. There's a story about how he ends up committing suicide, and that's after they find out that David's going to be the next king. And then David refuses to kill Saul over and over again because he was anointed by God in their belief. So David replaces Saul. Now, David was described in the Bible as having a heart after God's own. His desire was not only to do what it was right, but also he wanted to make a temple for the Lord, uh, like establish a specific place for the Ark of the Covenant and whatnot, which I didn't even mention. Oh well, the Ark of the Covenant had like the Tablet of the Ten Commandments and all this other stuff. Um, that was sacred to their religion. And so they had a place called the Tabernacle where they would go to offer sacrifices and stuff like that. And they had a ton of specific rituals. Again, I can't go specifically into because then we would be here for hours. Just if you want, read Exodus through Leviticus, and you'll see what I mean when it comes to the stinking rules. And it goes very in depth in how they make stuff and how many materials they use, like how long, wide, and stuff like that. They go into building different things, but David does not complete the temple. He's unable to achieve his dream. And he's infamous for making like the biggest mistake of his life was basically assassinating a dude and taking his wife. Yeah, and yeah. That's all I have to say about that. It's pretty self-explanatory. So anyway, his son Solomon becomes the next king after David dies. There's a story about how Solomon wishes for wisdom. And what does Solomon do later in life? He gets 700 wives and 300 concubines. Woohoo. And if you don't know what concubines are, you can have a pretty good idea now. But he established, like he's before that, in 960 BC, he's able to finish the temple of the Lord, which was David's dream. He was able to finish his father's dream, and especially in the early days, he was able to uh, really fulfill or continue his father's legacy, and was known as a wise judge and a good judge. Um, as the story goes, Solomon put a guy named Jeroboam as an official while Jeroboam was young. He established him as an official since he saw his great potential. A prophet named Ahijah, not one of like the major prophets. There's not even a book about him. It's like Ahijah. Guy named Ahijah. I'm probably butchering that, but I don't care. I really don't care. Said that God was going to take the kingdom from Solomon, and he cut up his own robe into 12 pieces and said to Jeroboam, take these 10 pieces for yourselves. But God says that He will not take the whole kingdom away from Solomon, and so those 12 pieces represented the tribes of Israel, the 12 tribes. Um, Israel as a whole ended up divided, but what happened was the North started rebelling against the South a little bit. Um, we see that Jeroboam runs away because after hearing that he would basically become the new king of Israel, it was promised that his family would rule over the 10 tribes at least for a time. Um, so Solomon tries to kill him, of course, and Solomon dies. So he doesn't get assassinated or anything. He dies of natural causes, and then there's a great rebellion. The North. The North separates from the South. The North is the 10 tribes, except for two, Levi and Judah. These 10 tribes established Jeroboam as their king, and boom, that is the northern kingdom of Israel. The kingdom of southern kingdom, southern kingdom of Israel. uh, was known as the kingdom of Judah instead, since it had only two tribes, Judah and Levi. Uh, it's also worth noting that it was only called Judah because Levi did not count as a tribe. Levi was the tribe of the priests, while Judah was the tribe of the kings. The priests would be fully devoted to God. Instead, the tribe of Joseph was split into Ephraim and Manasseh. So that's they're half tribes, so that's why they're only called the 10 tribes in the north instead. And so this whole thing causes a great divide between Israel as a nation and a people. And we'll see that the kings continue to mess up. But the first king of Judah was Rehoboam in 930 BC, and in the north that was Jeroboam, and they're both Boams. Yeah, I know it's weird. There's a lot of similar names. I mean, you can only be so creative when you're making up a story about how the world was made, right? But but anyway, um, I don't feel like going much longer. It's been like at least 20 minutes, right? 25 minutes, 26 minutes. But that's all for now. So that's kind of how the kingdom of Israel was established and then split apart. We saw the temple of the Lord being made, and the temple is key to the Jewish religion, as it is where they have to offer sacrifices for sins, to be forgiven for their sins, and also sometimes it's a ritual for specific years or dates, or when people are even born. So I'm not going to go super into Judaism when it comes to that stuff because I would be here for hours, and I don't got time for that, and neither do you. Um, but anyway, that's the basic gist. Don't believe everything I say, even though I did a ton of research and stuff like that. I brought up random archaeology. There's a lot more out there if you want to look for it, but look at other sources. Don't believe just the first thing you see, okay? Don't trust me, even though I say I'm right, because I'm probably not completely right. Um, but if you're really interested in it, go and look at other videos, go do research yourself. Don't just believe what other people say. But regardless, um, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great day. If you like this or have an idea for other rants, I will be continuing this one later. This is like a multi-part, this is pretty big. But if you have ideas for other rants, maybe like how the sequel trilogy sucks, and maybe like tier lists for the different Star Wars movies, because I got some hot takes. 5 is pretty good, just saying. But if you have any ideas like that, let me know. If you have any general comments like, "Oh, this was good," or "Oh, this kind of sucked," do something completely different, please let me know. I want to get better, so this will be more entertaining for you. If you liked it, like the video and whatnot. But anyway, I'll let you go. Thanks for watching. May God bless you today and forever. See ya.